Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that moves, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's meet these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Here we go. Touchdown!
You are listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another week, and we are talking offensive line play here as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 176. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with former NFL offensive line coach Paul Alexander, who not only did he coach in the NFL over the course of 3 decades and coach some of the best offensive linemen in the game, but now that he's out of the league, he's been tutoring some of the young offensive linemen as they prepare for the NFL draft. And his best pupil this spring, none other than Eagles first-round pick Andre Dillard. That gives us plenty to discuss here today. So we'll talk about Andre, we'll talk about the young offensive linemen preparing for the NFL, and a lot more. Let's get to that chat now in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, really excited to welcome in Coach Paul Alexander here to Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Like I mentioned, Coach has been one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL over the course of the last 3 decades. And to get some of his knowledge about the game and about the position, really lucky to have him here on the show. Coach, welcome into Chalk Talk here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
So, Coach, I had heard through the grapevine that you had worked with Eagles first-round pick Andre Dillard, and so I really wanted to kind of pick your brain about Andre and some of the things that you saw from him before we get into just general offensive line play and what works in the NFL. So my first question to you is this. When you first got your hands on Andre, take us through when that happened, and what was your initial impression of him when you first got to see him and work with him up close?
Well, Andre's a great guy, and he was out in California in Los Angeles with his agent at Rep 1, and they asked me to come out and work with him, and this was before he went down to the Senior Bowl. I went and worked with him. I watched some film with him. We talked about the process. We did some on-field things, and I was impressed with the ability that kid had. He has all the athletic measurables. He has the size. He has the strength. He has the recovery. He has the athleticism. He's flexible. He's powerful. He's explosive. He has all the traits you really look for in a top-level NFL offensive lineman. What he did lack a little bit was he had some techniques that he learned in college that, of course, Coach Leach runs a very unique offense out there at Washington State. They take big, huge splits on their offensive line. They vertical set and pass protection. They don't run block very often. Those are techniques that aren't really NFL tailored. However, he did get a new offensive line coach last year, Coach Miller, out at Washington State, and he tightened the splits down a little bit, and he set a little bit more traditional, like he would set in the NFL in his pass protection. And so he did improve a little bit, but what I saw was a guy with tremendous talent who'd been using some techniques that were more tailored toward his college offense that weren't going to work in the NFL. And we started to work on those things, and he took them down to the Senior Bowl, and he had a good showing there.
Yeah, he certainly helped himself. We talked about that last week on the Journey to the Draft podcast. The Senior Bowl was huge for his ability to kind of help himself during the pre-draft process. So take us through now. You work with him again after the Senior Bowl. Did you see a kind of a different guy at that point? What did you see after that week in practice?
I saw a completely different guy, and I saw a guy who's he was a confident guy before, but after the Senior Bowl, you could just see how excited he was because he went down there. He realized that he could block the best and do a good job, and people were talking favorably about him, and you could just see his confidence grow, and that was really exciting to see before the Combine.
Then he goes to the Combine, and when you worked with him leading up to Indianapolis, was it more about the drill work? Did you have anything to do with any of the kind of the athletic testing portion as well, or was it more drill work?
It had to do with two parts. There was a drill work, which is really kind of interesting. I hadn't coached anyone up before, but I kind of just looked at it every time he did a drill. Let me back up a little bit. When I would grade a guy at the combine, he would do a drill, and I would give him a grade from 1 to 5 based on how he did that drill, 5 being a Pro Bowler, 1 being reject, everything in between. And he would do a drill, and I would yell out, 3. Your head was too high, or your footwork wasn't right, or your shoulders turned, or whatever. Do it again. I'd give you a 3+ there, 4 minus, 4, and we keep going and going and going. And it was kind of fun. I was doing it trying to get him to look like what I would grade a guy as a 5 on that drill. And that's what we did. We went through the series of drills that he did at the combine. And he did a great job there, obviously. And then we spent a lot of time on the interview process.
Yep.
The type of questions they're going to ask, what they're looking for, how to present your best self forward, how to be yourself, really, not how to answer questions that necessarily they want to hear the answer to. But then again, maybe not share different parts of yourself that they wouldn't be interested in. I was working not just with him, but with the 3 guys that were there. I kind of just told them, I said, when they ask you what do you like to do other than play football, don't say, I like to play video games. I can't tell you how many guys I would sit there and interview over the years at the combine and say, well, what do you like to do? I like to chill, and I like to play video games, and I like to hang out. And I remember thinking, are you kidding me? No. Say you like to play basketball. Say you like to go hunting. I don't know. Talk about things that are active. Even if it's I like to read. Okay, I can deal with that. You know what I mean? But don't tell me you like to chill. And so not just Andre, but all 3 of the guys I was working with, I told them, those are the important things to say, that you want to be truthful, you want to be honest. At the same time, you want to put your best foot forward.
So what was that like for you, just being on the other side of that? And that had to be obviously very different for you.
It was stress-free.
I imagine.
It was great. Yeah, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the untold stories of the combine. Everybody talks about the 40-yard dash and the bench press, and we see them at the media session, and we talk about those things, and we talk the media, the interviews at night that they do with teams, and what they do, how important those are, and the medical. That's another side of it as well. That's kind of behind the curtain. So I was glad that you gave us a little bit of insight in terms of what teams are looking for, what coaches are looking for when they have those meetings, and it was interesting. The Eagles mentioned that they met with him at the Senior Bowl before he got to the combine. So before he was able to get some of that training, the Eagles were able to kind of get a sense of the kid that he was and what he brought to the table, which obviously went a long way.
Well, guess what? I got him before the Senior Bowl, so they got him trained up.
Well, that's you doing your job, Coach. All right, so let me ask you this question. What's the area that you felt he most improved himself from day one with you up until draft day?
Well, the things we talked about, some of the NFL techniques. And the one thing I want to make the point, I know you didn't ask the question, but I want to make sure I brought this up because I think it's going to be really interesting for your listeners that your coach, who's an excellent coach, Jeff Stoutland, one of the best, right? The good thing about Jeff working with this kid is that all of us as offensive line coaches, we have different techniques, and those techniques come from different schools. Now, Jeff and I, we never coached together, but we're from philosophically the same school, meaning that we are leverage pass blockers. What does that mean? It means using hands to, grab, wrestle, whatever, rather than quick-footed punch, chop. It's the 2 schools in pass protection. And Jeff is from that leverage school. Now, this kid, his physical traits are perfectly for leverage school. they're not necessarily for quick feet, chop, punch school. And so I think the fact that they like the kid that they got, but more important than that, they've got the right marriage between the right coach's philosophy and the physical traits that are ideal for that philosophy.
As a quick follow-up,
if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, as a quick follow-up to that, I'd love to, what is it that's kind of sets that guy apart if you have an offensive lineman that says, all right, this skill set goes one way and this one goes the other?
Well, if you're a strong guy and you got long arms and you got good balance and you got a big butt to anchor with, which he does, typically your best is a wrestler, if you will, a muscler, a leverage player, which he is. And I would say that Peters is probably more of that way than, I can't believe I can't think of his name, than the right tackle is.
And Lane Johnson, sure.
Yeah. Lane is, more of a quick-footed, real fast, a quick-punched type of guy. So he kind of now Lane does a lot of the leverage techniques that coach teaches, but typically if a guy is just super quick and athletic but not real strong, then he wouldn't do as well with the leverage techniques. And this kid has those traits.
Coach, one of the big things that a lot of the media and the fans are talking about here in Philadelphia, just about Andre coming from that system, and you mentioned earlier, he wasn't asked to run block all that much. And when you look at a guy with his skill set, he showed it a little bit at the Senior Bowl. What do you kind of work with? I'm sure you've dealt with offensive linemen coming from those systems in the past, coming from an air raid style system. What are the first things you have to work on to try and say, okay, this is how you're going to get better playing out of a 3-point stance and working at the point of attack in the run game?
Well, it's obviously, when I first came in the league close to 30 years ago, you got guys from high school and college, and they all knew how to put their hand on the ground, and they all knew how to fire out, and they could drive a sled, and they could hit through the chutes, and they could, they knew how to do that. And so you had to teach guys how to pass block. That was foreign to them. What I see now with the difference in football is it's just the opposite. These guys are coming now, most of them, had been in 2-point stances, and they know how to pass block, and they know how to play on their feet and not overextend and those kind of things. But they really don't know how to get down, explode, drive. And it almost sounds ridiculous for someone who's not of the younger generation to even consider that. But it's true. So you need to teach them that from the beginning. You need to take these guys, believe it or not, that are in their mid-20s and train them almost like, we were trained when we were 14-year-old kids. Driving the sled, hitting through the chutes, teach them how to hit and drive with power, explode, Oklahoma drill, all the little things that teaches kids how to create leverage and create movement in the run game. And so it's kind of unique. And to be honest with you, I've had mixed results with that. Some guys really never did it. It got them too late in life when they couldn't do it. Other guys learned it fairly quickly. So you got a good coach, and he knows that. He's aware of what he has to do, and I'm sure he's on top of it starting this weekend at minicamp.
Coach, one of the big things that everybody says about Andre, you just kind of talk about his feet. And now, everybody's breaking down film of these guys, when they're coming out of college, when they get to the NFL, NFL Game Pass, all that stuff is now available. When you're watching an offensive tackle on film, what does good feet look like versus bad feet? What is like the easiest way to kind of say, okay, like this guy, he has it and this guy doesn't?
Well, I think maybe the biggest misnomer, and this is even true with some people in the scouting community, professional people who misevaluate offensive line. There's something that I call good feet which is different than choppy feet or quick feet. Now, you can tell slow feet. Everyone can tell. If the guy's Herman Munster, if the guy can't move his feet, okay, well, forget it. Forget him. He doesn't have good feet. He doesn't have quick feet, all right? But then you get into the next level, and there's really two kind of players. There's players that have super quick, choppy feet, all right? And then there's people who have good feet, all right? Now let me explain the difference. The best player I coached, Willie Anderson, who's a Hall of Fame candidate, he had good feet. His feet moved only as quick as the guy he was blocking. He had balance. He could accelerate his feet. It didn't look like his feet were chopping, all right? It looked like they were under control, and the guy was always with the guy he's blocking. That's good feet to me. Now and Peters has what I would call good feet. Now you take another guy, and probably the biggest extreme I ever heard of that I ever saw was a kid named Kenyatta Walker, who was an early pick, I think a top 5 pick for Tampa.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Years ago, all right, who failed. All right, now when you watch Kenyatta Walker on film, you saw his feet. I mean, they were so quick. They were chopping. They were the quickest dang things you ever saw in your life. And everybody loved that. And everyone fell in love with how quick his feet were. Well, quick feet that aren't controlled aren't good feet. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's, you're talking about people wondering what good feet is. It's not how fast the feet move. It's, does the guy stay mirrored on the guy or in the proper position, run or pass, and maintain the proper leverage point while he's blocking? If he can do that, the guy has good feet. If the guy is blocking and then the guy gets off of his edge, gets away from him, then he's got bad feet, no matter how quick they are.
Yeah, I know one of the things people will talk about is, if a guy's toes start getting pointed to the sideline, so maybe he gets to the spot, the feet get him there, but now he gets so wonky and kind of opens up the gate a little bit. Now he doesn't have that ability to kind of mirror and stay in front of the guy like you mentioned.
Yeah, well, guys do that. You're talking about toes opening the sideline, and that can be two different things. That can be a technical issue, or it can be a compensation for bad feet. So just because the guy's toes turn to the sideline doesn't mean the guy has bad feet.
Sure.
It may mean that he has improper technique, or it could mean he has bad feet, and it's a compensation.
Coach, what's one part of offensive line play that gets kind of overhyped a little bit? Maybe you hear, guys get knocked a little bit, for this trait or that trait, but that is easily coached out of. You can say, that's all fine and good, but that can get fixed within the first couple months here that he's in the league. Is there one thing that you constantly hear that you say, this can get fixed? I'd rather focus my attention here in this area.
I don't think it's one thing, but I can give you an example. There was a kid, Greg Little from Ole Miss, that was in the draft class this year. Yeah. And he got knocked because he wasn't a very good run blocker. Well, he was obviously a pass blocking machine. Maybe, one of the top 2 pass blockers in the draft. All right, but his run blocking was weird. His problem was guys blocking to his inside. Guys would penetrate on him on the down block, on the double team, those things, and it happened way too often. But when I watched the film, he had an unusually over wide stance, and the feet were so wide in his stance that whenever he took a step, he would step and not gain any distance. Forever coaches have called that stepping underneath yourself, all right? Which, okay, that's what coaches call it. It doesn't really make any sense, all right? But anyway, so he wouldn't gain any distance with his first step because his stance was too wide. Now, I made the comment on, some different media interviews I did. I said, that's a 5-minute fix. I mean, you narrow his stance, and he can gain ground with a step, and he'll be able to block to his inside on a running play. And so those are the kind of things. Some of those fixes are very quick. all right? Other of them are terminal, all right? And I can't really say that there's one unique thing that comes up all the time. It's, if offensive line play was so easy to understand and evaluate and fix and all that kind of stuff, then they wouldn't have guys like us that they pay a lot of money for.
That's right.
I mean, it's very difficult. It's a life study. It's a life's work. It's a grind for 70 hours a week for virtually 12 months a year for 30 years, finding out little details and how to fix little things. And I think sometimes that people try to jump in there and evaluate offensive line when they really haven't gone through that process too much, and I think sometimes they get frustrated, and they shouldn't, because it's a life's work of research.
Well, Coach, I could talk to you about this and pick your brain for hours, because you have gone through that process and you just have such a wealth of knowledge about the position. Really, really appreciate the time. Is there anything that you want to promote? I know you're doing some work with the Pro Coach Network. Anything that you want to talk about that you're working on right now leading up to the summer?
Yeah, there's a couple things doing. Like you said, I'm sponsored by Pro Coach Network. That's a group of 50 retired NFL coaches that do consulting for media, training players, working with kids one-on-one, either in person or virtually. I suggest anyone who has a young guy that would like to get coached by an NFL coach to check out procoach.network. That's one thing. The other thing is I'm touring the world. I'm going all around. You can follow me on Twitter at Coach Paul Alex, and I'm really enjoying this year out of coaching where I'm going everywhere. I've been to Germany. I'm going to London. I'm going coast to coast on a tour coming up in June, and working with players, working with high schools, and trying to share the knowledge, share the game.
Well, Coach, really, really appreciate the time. Enjoy your travels, and we'll hope to talk to you again soon. Great stuff from Coach, and you can follow him on Twitter just like I do, at Coach Paul Alex. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all of the podcasts I'm a part of and all the content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And you know, I appreciate everybody that promotes and shares this podcast on any form of social media. But the best way to do it is to go onto Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever you listen, and go and leave us a rating and leave us a comment. We don't have any comments in the queue right now. We used them up over the last couple of weeks. So here's my request for everybody. We're going to be building out shows for the next few weeks leading up to training camp, and I would love if you've got a topic that you would love us to cover, wide receiver play, pass game concepts, different coverage concepts, whatever it is that you want to hear us talk about, go on to Apple Podcasts, leave a comment, and we will make sure we cover it here before the start of training camp. A lot of guests here in the Rolodex that we're going to be rolling through over the course of the next couple of months. But if there's something that you specifically want to hear about, now's the time. Go on. If you want your voice to be heard, jump on Apple Podcasts, leave a comment with a rating, and we'll make sure we cover it here before things get going later this summer. But that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Great stuff from Coach Paul Alexander. Excited to talk with him about both Andre and the offensive line play here in the NFL. Until then, we will see you next week here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast.